So in this video lecture, we will discuss the need for ethical policies and codes. I will also briefly discuss how to deal with conflict of interest. I will give you some examples. I have studied the ExxonMobil's code of conduct, and I will try to tell you from my own experience as a former employee how ExxonMobil, how nicely in a methodical, professional manner it enforces code of conduct. I will give you an example also how strict they are in enforcing code of conduct, because if you take it lightly and if you are not serious about it, then that code of conduct exists only in paper. It's meaningless. And also my favorite company's code of conduct, Wipro's code of conduct, how much importance Wipro attaches to it, how comprehensive it is, and how the code of conduct it acts as a light, as a beacon in a even in darkness, and how it helps employees, new and old, especially the new employees, to navigate their way if they face a dilemma or if they face a question wherein moral turpitude is involved. I hope you will enjoy this. Hi students, continuing with the unit 4 and with the conflict of interest. I have already posted two videos. In the last video, we had discussed three cases of conflict of interest, wherein I'd explained to you the conflict of interest case in respect of our revered cricketer and my personal favorite cricketer Rahul Dravid. How even a person like Rahul Dravid was seen to have been, committing a case of conflict of interest unknowingly, and how it was resolved eventually. We also discussed how knowingly Rajat Gupta, the former CEO of McKinsey, after he had left McKinsey as a CEO and he was on the board of Procter and Gamble and Goldman Sachs, how he indulged in insider trading and how this led to the embarrassment. He had to be jailed for 2 years. And the third concept I discussed with you, the third example or the case I discussed with you was Arthur Anderson, one of the big four audit companies, which had to lose its license of auditing. They no longer audit by under that name, by their, if not compliance, then by overlooking the frauds which were committed by Enron Corporation, a which was a blue chip company, but it was doing so well in the New York Stock Exchange. But why it was doing well is because they were cooking books and they were overstating profits. So this all these cases clearly tell you that there is a need for ethical policies and code. There is a need for one book or one classified, codified knowledge which employees should have, or the top management also should have. So sometimes a question is asked, what is the need for ethical policies and codes? So the first point which I want to say, and I am basing my presentation based upon the book called Principles of Management by Dr. Praveen Durai. It's a book by Pearson, published by Pearson Education. First is that code of ethics, they enable an organization to create an ethical workplace. Unless there are rules, you can't play a game, isn't it? Unless there are rules, you can't play a game. And or any activity, unless there is a sense of protocol, unless there are do's and don'ts. So first is code of ethics will enable an organization to create an ethical workplace. Each employee will clearly understand the standard of behavior and values of the organization. This is very important. So you understand that your organization has got these standards and you have to uh, or you have to follow those standards. So this is number one. Number two is, if you see of late, organizations, they are having fewer level of management and they are pushing decision making to the line managers. So as a result, any decision by immediate supervisor can be viewed as a personal and subjective by subordinates. This situation calls for a strict adherence to a code of ethics. Let me explain to you again. Earlier, earlier there were many levels of supervision. So, for example, in sales, there was a or a president sales. There were four regional sales managers. Under regional sales managers, there were uh, zonal managers. Under zonal managers, there were, district managers. Under district managers, there were area managers, and then sales officers. Now, all this process has changed. Now there is a centralized sales team, and then there are four regional managers, and under them, in a company setup, there are state managers, and then there are area managers or the managers in the front line. So earlier it was possible that in case you thought that the directive which you were getting from your immediate boss, you had several levels, and you could escalate it. Now levels have disappeared. Once level have disappeared, so that means span of control of the top guy has increased tremendously. So it is not possible for him, for the top guy, or let us say the state head, to be interacting with all these area managers himself. So is this what I am doing right? Suppose suppose you work for a food company, and all food products have an expiry date. Okay, so there is one particular product line which is not doing well. You collect it back, and then you need to destroy this. So is it okay to not destroy everything and to repack and relabel some of the things and sell, or allow the distributor to do it? So it's possible that if there is no code which exists, no standard operating procedures which exist, then people will take subjective decisions. Okay, so this is what it means, that if you have a code, people will have strict adherence to the that code of ethics. Third point which Professor Praveen Durai says is, he says there is a and I may not agree with him completely, but let me state what he says. He says the growing presence of knowledge worker in the organization has necessitated the introduction of strong ethical policies. He says because knowledge workers are more likely to violate laws and code of ethics as compared to the earlier generation of worker. While this is a subjective point, however, it is correct that the knowledge workers, especially with IT having taken center stage in all the businesses, and India having become a hub of IT services which are outsourced from developing nations to the countries, you require knowledge workers who are highly skilled in their domain knowledge, but they may not have that much wisdom, because number one, they are all young. Number two, they are masters in their own field, and in their own work which they are doing, they will require minimum of supervision. Let me explain. Suppose there is a young BTech, or there is a young IT professional who's who's doing the coding for a foreign bank. Okay, he is very good at his job. He does not require day-to-day supervision. But when this person, he is dealing he is dealing with the suppliers, or let us say with the other staff, it's likely that he may not have the requisite experience and maturity, and there is very little supervision. So it is for this that once these youngsters, knowledge workers, join, there is a ethical policy and a code, and during their induction program, these young boys and girls are told about the do's and don'ts, and then they should be linked with some people whom they can contact in case they are having any confusion in interpretation. So to that extent, to from Dr. Praveen Durai's point, I think the point is well taken. Point number four, and a very valid point by enunciated by Dr. Praveen Durai, is he says visible ethical policies can send a clear signal to the employees that the organization is serious about ethics. Let me elaborate it further. Suppose you take the policy of uh, respecting women employees, you believe in gender equality, and you believe in following all the procedures which are there, all the loose rules which are there to protect the women colleagues in an organization. POSH, POSH, that is the POSH Act, Prevention of Sexual Harassment Act. And in your code of conduct, you have included that inter- internal complaint committees exist. These are the name of the people whom a woman can approach in case she feels sexually harassed by anybody in the company. And you include adherence to POSH Act very strongly in your ethical policy. So it gives a clear signal to the employees that the organization is serious about uh, giving requisite respect to the women employees, and it will make no compromise. It will make no compromise when it comes to dealing with the ethical standards and violation. Like if you have a no bribing policy, and you can neither give bribe or take bribe, you cannot, and it's written very prominently, nobody can duck under the cover of saying, had I not bribed, I would have lost the contract. Losing a contract is okay, but bribing is not. This is a policy. Good big corporates like Wipro, I keep on talking of Wipro because I am somehow in awe of their ethical standards. So they mention this in their ethical policies. They have a clear policy of what is the value of the gift which you can take. Okay, so these are 4 points. We will go to some more points in the next slide. Continuing with the topic of need for ethical policies and codes, and once again I am giving full credit to Professor Dr. Durai Swami. I have taken this from his book, which has been published by Pearson Education. I have bought the Kindle edition, Principles of Management. So he says, Dr. Praveen Durai says that ethical policies they enable managers to evaluate quickly their proposed actions with the company's code of conduct. Let me explain. There was a time when during the NDA rule, when Vajpayee was the Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the Prime Minister, there was a spurt in the activities of highway construction. And I recall that at that point in time, many companies, international big companies, they were invited and they participated in the tender process. So everything was fine. When it came to the stretch of construction of the highway in Naxal infested area in in the it was in Jharkhand and in Chhattisgarh. There was a company. I will not name the company or the nationality of the company because it will get out. It's not good on my part. I was in the NHAI's office and I saw that the one of the senior persons of that company, he came and he said that he will not be able to construct the road in that area. So the NHI official asked him, is it because of the threat? No, he says, no, it's not threat because the state government is helping us and everything is there. He says, but there is an unwritten rule that there is. I'm talking of many years ago that there was this tradition of paying safety fees to unauthorized people. He says if the government of India demanded that fees, they could pay it by check. It was not a problem. But there is no way they would be able to pay a bribe or a protection money to any third party in cash. He says because this is simply not allowed in their code of conduct. And he says he can forfeit the contract, and he is willing to pay whatever penalty, but he says, and he had this unflinching faith in his code of conduct. So the NHA official suggested that, why don't you talk to your seniors in Europe, and oh, I have said Europe, so I should not have said. And maybe, because he said it's impossible. I don't have to ask them. It will never be permitted. It will never be permitted. Another see, so perhaps when they entered into this contract, they had not envisaged the situation that such a situation will arise. How eventually that thing was sorted out, I'll explain to you. But it's clear. Ethical policy will enable managers to evaluate quickly their proposed actions. So if you are, if you suppose you work in a, I'm taking a hypothetical example. You work in a hospital. You are a doctor, and you have this policy of not doing certain procedures unless you have explained those procedures very well to the relatives in detail, and you have explained all the pros and cons. And after a doctor has explained all the procedures, you go in for that operation or something. So it's you just cannot skip this process. You see, in some of the private hospitals or even in government hospitals, they will just explain to you in a haphazard manner or very quickly, and then they will just take your signatures. But if there are certain hospitals which have very good ethical policies, and they strictly adhere to the policy. Another remarkable point about the need for ethical policies and code is that generally public image of companies that practice ethical values is held high in the society. So as a result, companies will keep their trust. The consumers will keep their trust in those companies that ensure fairness in dealing with people. See, let's take the case of hand sanitizers. In the pandemic, hand sanitizer has become it's mandatory, almost like everybody keeps hand sanitizer. Even poorest of poor will keep hand sanitizer at home. So before somebody enters, if you go to a vegetable vendor, uh, he will offer you hand sanitizer. He will sanitize his hands. So what I'm saying is, but still people look for those brands. Like people still look for a brand like Dettol or Savlon or any other popular brand, because people generally think that small fly by night companies have also come in this segment, and they're just packaging something anyhow in a bottle and passing it off as sanitizer. I am giving you giving you a small example because image is very important. The image of a company is very important. So people, but if there is a hand sanitizer by Dettol or Lifebuoy or Savlon or Patanjali or Dabur or any companies, Godrej, people will have a people generally tend to have more faith in that. So this is same is true for investors. Investors, when they invest in companies, they look to those companies which have got high ethical standards and which have got policies and codes. For example, I just think of, suppose there is a housing project which is coming up, which is uh, basically by Godrej Group or Tata Group. Generally people will tend to have faith because Godrej is seen as a company which they have been dealing with for for at least two generations, three generations now, and Tatas. So ethical companies all have ethical policies. Why? And they adhere to it because, one, I have explained, it's a guidebook for all the employees, for all the stakeholders, and it also helps create a favorable impression, image in the minds. And image is something which is very important. Optics. You must have heard this word optics. You should you should be clear about the facts. Facts are important. Optics are also important. How these facts are presented is also important. Last but not the least is that ethical companies also attract the best candidates from the labor market. When I say labor, I mean knowledge industry or whatever, all employees. See, there is a survey which is carried out by Glassdoor and many other websites of most respected employers, best companies to work for. You can't be a you can't be one of the best companies to work for if you don't have ethical policies and codes. You're just a hire and fire kind of a you have a hire and fire kind of a philosophy. Companies which have strong code of ethics, which focus on business practices and specific issues such as conflict of interest, accuracy of information, prevention of harassment, very important, prevention of harassment, safety and environment compliance. Companies which have code of ethics which encompasses all these things are respected companies, and professionals want to work in such companies. So managers should be the model of ethical behavior so that employees follow it willingly and voluntarily. So I hope you have understood why the need for ethical policies and codes. Now a company may be very ethical but it does not have a code of ethics. So the underlying strength is that this is an ethical company. The philosophy is ethical, but there is no code of ethics which is there. So this is useless. So that means you are an umpire in a cricket field, but there is no book of umpiring. There are no written rules. Is it possible? Can that game be a fair game? So same, you must have inherent faith in the moral values and ethical values, and you must have it all codified. And once everything is codified, then everyone has a reference point or a benchmark to look up to. Okay, a manager will say, can I increase the price during scarcity? But if there is an ethical policy of not profiteering, so that manager will not think of doing so. So thanks to Dr. Praveen Durai for this excellent repertoire of knowledge which I have been able to share with you. Sometimes in an examination, a question is asked, how do good organizations deal with the conflict of interest? And so I have tried to uh, summarize in a few points as to how do good organizations try to deal with the conflict of interest. First of all, the companies, they first is establish clear company policies, clearly worded policies, and publish them in the form of a handbook. Is very important. Who will establish the company policies? Top management can make a steering committee to write the company policy, but the blessing of the top management of the when I say top management, I don't merely mean CEO. I mean the board of the company also, because a CEO may be a person who may be a professional CEO and he may not really have a he may not have a real stake or a share in the company. While the board can mandate the CEO, okay, you please, you are responsible for establishing the clear company policy. But I think the board itself must form a committee, and board must be responsible for establishing clear company policy. Most importantly, it should be clearly worded policy. There should be no ambiguity. You have to write giving and taking bribes is forbidden. You cannot write giving and taking bribe is forbidden except or anything. I mean, it's a bad example I'm giving, but what I'm saying is it should be clearly worded, and you should publish them in the form of handbook or a booklet. Number two is you should hold workshop for explaining these policies to employees, especially in case of new inductees. Some companies do a video lecture on their websites and they play it, and all employees are expected to go through that video lecture. Sometimes new employees, they are given that handbook, and the HR head or the somebody senior from the HR, he explains all the policies to them. Third is top leadership must lead by example. If a member of the top leadership is seen to be violating that policy, of conflict of interest, then you had it. I know of a case in a lubricant company. It was it was a company which has operations in a few countries. Their regional manager, he had taxi services, because there were many area managers who used to frequently hire cabs. I'm talking of 90s, early 2000. So this gentleman had 30 taxis in the name of his wife. That he had floated a company, and he would tell his colleagues to hire taxis only from his wife's company. So this is a clear conflict of interest. So that means if there is an area manager who regularly takes a cab from your wife's company, and if he also starts to run a business of distributing lubricants, can you in the name of his wife, so can you morally ask him to desist from doing so? So top leadership must lead by example. Fourth is, I said there should be handbooks. Collect handbook acknowledgement forms. Everything should be in writing. You have explained to the employees what is conflict of interest, what is your company's policy on conflict of interest. Make them sign a form in which they declare that they have read the policy, they have understood the policy. It is very important, because once you sign a document, it becomes legally binding upon you. It becomes your legal responsibility, it becomes your moral responsibility. Sixth point is, in many companies, employees, they are asked to sign non-compete agreement. Non-compete agreement is, suppose you, in the course of your professional duty, you come across certain competitive, certain key success factors. If the company management shares them with you, or you get some kind of a intellectual property, exposure to some intellectual property, or some marketing technique which is vital to your company, which has been developed by your company, so the companies sign non-compete clause with the employees that they will not share it. Even after they leave the company, they will not share that knowledge, sometimes with the competitors. Sometimes they say they will forbid this person, an employee, to join a competing company for so many years. In India it is prohibited, by the way. In India it is prohibited, but in many countries non-compete agreement is legal. So because we are basing our lecture to use to the students, and someday or the other you can work for companies and countries where non-compete agreement is agreements are completely valid. So I wanted to tell you that non-compete agreement, it helps in a way for avoiding future conflict of interest. Future conflict of interest. Okay. Another point is you should sign non-disclosure agreements, NDA. What is non-disclosure? Non-disclosure means, suppose I work for a company which is making it's a jewelry company. Okay, when I'm making jewelry, I have I know of certain procedures which have been developed only by my company. I am running a scheme with my downline. My downline means I am running a scheme with my channel partners, and this scheme is such a novel scheme that it has been developed only by my company. So I have a non-disclosure agreement that my company, my distributors cannot disclose the details of this agreement, of this scheme, because somebody else will copy it. So if you have information which is so vital, so sensitive for the survival of your company or for the success of your company, that you don't want it to be shared with your competitors, then you sign a non-disclosure agreement, NDA. Sometimes, suppose I am a I am a startup company, and I am talking to a I'm talking to an investor. So when the investor wants to invest in me, he will ask me what is my have I done any pilot project, or what is my unique concept. So I'll sign an NDA with him. Okay, you if you invest in me, and if you don't invest in me, it is okay, but you will not discuss the idea with somebody else. I know of somebody who did a very good job in terms of giving unique address to every flat in Pune. And they developed a unique product, a great product. And then they were called by a private equity, and this they gave the entire presentation to the private equity, and this private equity later on uh, gave this idea to somebody else, and that another company developed this idea further, but they had signed the non-disclosure agreement. So this startup from Pune, they have sued the private equity for a very huge amount. Okay. uh, Second last point is, ask employees to disclose relationships, because conflict of interest is very common if there are close relationship between, let us say, boss and subordinate. So if it is a father and son relationship, it is evident, everybody knows about it. Normally, a son will not be given an opportunity to work under father, because if the father has a large team, there could be a conflict of interest. The father may be seen to be favoring his son, even if he does not. Okay, so you have to disclose relationship, that okay, I have been recommended by such and such person, or my relationship with this person and board is this. And suppose you are a sales manager, and you have a task of including distributors in your team, and you have a premium product. So you need to tell, if this distributor was with me, I have known him, how he's my close relative, or he's not my close relative. So all these things have to be disclosed. So employees need to disclose relationship, because once you disclose relationship, then the company can take a call. Okay, for example, if you are a sales manager and your father is uh, a state manager, then the company can take a decision. Okay, you have been selected for the position of a sales, for a sales position, but you cannot work in the same territory where of your father is the team head. So they can give you another state or another territory. And last point is, when you deal with conflict of interest, you have to take action if necessary. If you just let the things go, if you just uh, don't take action, if you're not seen to be serious about taking any action, then you cannot deal with conflict of interest. I remember a gentleman in Indian Oil Corporation. He was a HR head. He used to tell me, you should come down like a ton of bricks if somebody is indulging in corruption. If you don't do that, corruption will thrive. I remember his words. You should come down on people who are corrupt like a ton of bricks. That is what he said. Because if you are not serious about it, then a culture will it will pervade the organization, that okay, the conflict of interest policy is there, but it is in the books only. No real action is taken. This is something which is disastrous. So this is how I've tried to explain to you how to deal with conflict of interest. One company where I worked, and for the first time perhaps, when I joined them as manager business development, which is Exxon Mobil. At that time, I was working for a subsidiary called Esso Petroleum. I came across their standard of business conduct. Actually, Exxon Mobil's standards of business conduct, they define the global ethical conduct of the corporation. So it is the global corporation has got uh, almost the identical business conduct, and it covers all the subsidiaries. Subsidiaries are where ExxonMobil has a majority stake, and these standards are adopted and administered by the board of directors. See, I'm just trying to tell you the seriousness with which large corporates, professional companies take their code of ethics. So these standards, which are administered by board of directors, and they are not there to enforce basically any business furtherance, but to uphold the human rights, the labor rights. the environment, and anti-corruption. Most important. So the code of ethics, it focuses first to uphold the human rights. Second, to uphold the labor rights. Third, environment and anti-corruption. So I just want to tell you the gist of the code of ethics of ExxonMobil. Nobody has an authority to make exception. Nobody, not even chairman of ExxonMobil. Nobody has the authority to make exceptions or grant waivers to the standards. And employees, but they believe in reviewing this. So every year there is a committee which is formulated by the board, and they are expected to review the standards each year. And last point, but not the least point, is disciplinary action is taken against any employee who violates them. The employee may be the best performing business unit head, but if he violates the ExxonMobil code of ethics, disciplinary action will be taken against that. And it's likely that higher the post a person is holding, the disciplinary action is more stringent. Why? Because ExxonMobil believes that while ethics can set the standard in the form of a book, people are more inspired by the way their managers act. If the managers act ethically, if they respect the code of ethics, the team will respect the code of ethics. So I really had liked. So I will tell you also a bit about their code of ethics, but I wanted to give you these 4 points, that these are universal code of ethics. Standards are there to uphold human rights, labor, environment, anti-corruption. No one can make exception or grant waiver, and disciplinary action is taken against any employee from top to bottom who violates this. A few more points on the ExxonMobil's code of ethics and its informants. First of all, they have an ethics policy, and they have a very elaborate conflict of interest policy. Very elaborate conflict of interest policy. I think I have given you examples earlier also that uh, if there are two people who are dating and who are about to get into wedlock, going to get married, they are not. One of them will have to leave the company, and it has. I have seen this happening in India in the northern regions office, because they want no conflict of interest between your work duties and your personal relationship. They have a very detailed corporate asset policy. What are the company's assets? How to use them? What constitutes misuse of company's assets? I think it is very important to have a corporate asset policy. So, conflict of interest policy, corporate asset policy, they have a directorship policy in which they define what is an executive director, what is a non executive director, what are the roles and responsibilities, what are the fiduciary responsibilities of directors. Another thing is, when it comes to policy, when it comes to ethics, they have a policy of full disclosure and open door communication. So you can get into the office of the of you can knock and get inside the office of the person who heads that office. If you have, even if you are at the lowest level of hierarchy, and seek clarification on ethics. Not that progressive companies nowadays they believe too much in hierarchies, but when it comes to any kind of clarification, or you want to report a violation of a ethical, or you want to report anything, you can walk into the office of the head of your branch or your region or your, and if you're working in head office, you can walk into the office of the director HR or director marketing, or depending on the severity, you can go and meet the CEO also. How ExxonMobil enforces ethics, code of ethics and enforcement? They have regular internal audits, and in this audits, they not only are measuring financial irregularity, not only that, but if you are breaking a policy, there may not be. See, for example, you have delegation of authority. As a regional sales manager, you are entitled to give a credit of 30 days. I am giving you a hypothetical example. So you are a regional sales manager of Northern India and you have given 30-day credit to your distributor in Delhi. If you have in the delegation of authority guide, DOAG, DOAG, delegation of authority guide, if in the delegation of authority guide it is mentioned that you can give credit for 30 days, it's okay. If you have to give more than 30 days credit, you need to write to head office and you need to get the written approval. So normally what happens is in because of the exigencies of work, people will give it and later on seek approval. This is viewed very seriously in ExxonMobil. So I remember in one of the branches in some other country, the audit team came and they demanded to see all the approvals, and they came across a case where some kind of a credit was awarded which was beyond the credit limit of that regional manager, and he did not have a uh, the backing that he had taken approval from the management. See, even if you have a SMS approval, if you have an email approval, it is okay. But you cannot imagine that you will get an approval. So action was taken against internal audits for policies. Zero tolerance to bribery and corruption. Zero tolerance. Zero tolerance. You can lose. See, it's seldom that in ExxonMobil you will lose your job because of non-performance. It's very rare. But if they come across any innocuous case of bribery and you're coming to office and you're going back from office to home, during this period you cannot indulge in any bribery or in corruption because company views it very seriously, very seriously. Then there are trainings, there are workshops which are held wherein senior specialists they come, they ask you questions. As I told you that the policies are also reviewed every year. So sometimes the experts who write these policies they can come, they can have discussion with you. They could amend policies and take the board approval for it or the approval of the authorized person who is there to approve. And there is a mechanism wherein you can report violations of code of ethics 24/7. So this I thought I should share with you how big great companies they enforce code of ethics. Among the many things about Wipro, I have really liked their code of business conduct or COBC, and the founding the foundation of code of business conduct is integrity, honesty, and fairness. So integrity and honesty. There is a difference between integrity and honesty. Integrity goes beyond honesty. So if you are suppose you are selling medicines in a chemist shop and the medicine is about to expire in the month of January and you are at the end of January and you are in the first week of January. So if the customer will ask you that if the is the expiry okay, you are honest, you can say yeah, it is not expired, this is okay. But if you are a man of integrity, you will say yes, it's not expired, but the last date is 30th of or 31st of January. Integrity goes beyond honesty. Let us see some of the other factors of this concept of Wipro. Wipro, the spirit of Wipro, they say is it is compassionate about client success. So if you are passionate about client success, not compassionate. So if you are passionate about your client success, you are um naturally you do everything which is customer centric and client centric. Second spirit of Wipro is you treat each person with respect. When you declare that this is the spirit of Wipro, you treat each person with respect. Uh, this means that you don't your magnitude of respect does not vary. Basic courtesies and respect does not vary with the status of a person. The spirit of Wipro third is be global and responsible. Be global because Wipro operates in many countries. A sizable business of Wipro comes from Europe and especially the American markets. And the biggest thing is Wipro is unyielding in integrity in everything that it does. So, if you see the importance of Wipro's code of business conduct, you can gauge it by the fact that it is the chairman of the board, Mr. Rishad Premji, who has signed it. And he is addressing everybody as dear Wiproites. Our unflinching commitment to integrity, fairness, and transparency has made us globally trusted brand. When you see the executive chairman of a company signing the code of business conduct, then you understand that this has the backing of the top person. That makes every Wiproite take this code of business conduct very, very seriously. And it is a very comprehensive code. It covers all aspects of business. I have mentioned the table of contents. For example, the first is about the code and your responsibilities, to whom the code applies, how to use code in business conduct, what are the employees' responsibility, how you must cooperate with those who are carrying out a survey, investigation, and inquiries in case there are any violations. What is meant by ethical leadership? How to make the right choice? That means, second point is acting in the best interest of customers, business partners, and public. Customer relations, how to deal with customers, how to deal with suppliers, how to select suppliers, how to deal with conflict of interest, how to deal with gifts, entertainment, and business courtesies. So zero ambiguity. Also, it satisfies norms of SEC. What is SEC? USA, United States Security and Exchange Commission. It has very stringent norms, and equivalent of SEC is in India is SEBI, Securities and Exchange Board of India. Another thing which I liked is that they have a separate code that is even more stringent for principal officer and senior management. So even a more stringent code exists for senior management. So what I want to say is that the Wipro's code of conduct is comprehensive. It has no ambiguity. How to protect information and assets, it is mentioned in the Wipro's code of conduct. What is confidential information? What is meant by intellectual property? What is meant by competitive business intelligence? How do you safeguard companies' assets? And it follows all the laws of the land in letter and spirit. For example, they have a detailed explanation of what is insider trading, what is antitrust and fair competition, what is anti-corruption, what is anti-money laundering, what is how can you are you allowed to get involved in political movements or lobbying? Everything is covered in Wipro's code of conduct. Performance through teamwork and respect, human rights, diversity and non-discrimination, harassment-free workplace. So it's a tremendous piece of legislation. It's a tremendous piece of corporate handbook, and I was personally very, very, very impressed. So I have given a link somewhere. You can download it and you can study Wipro's code of business conduct.